We could have a hearing in the Senate this month. It's easily doable. I just handed out today a set of affidavits to the entire Senate Intel Committee. At least 4 of the nuclear weapons tampering witnesses are ready to come for an interview now. That would be a pre-hearing interview. There may be 3 or 4 others that would come. Certainly some can be Zoom because they're quite old. Some of them have health issues. But without question, if they called a hearing this month, a minimum of 4 SAC-based officers are prepared to sit down under oath and testify to that committee they were present when UAP craft hovered over their ICBM base and shut down all of our ICBM missiles. Bing, 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 which is essentially impossible. Not once, but on several occasions. And they did it in the Soviet Union. Now, we don't have witnesses from the Soviet Union. I shouldn't shock anybody. Doesn't mean that they may not turn up someday, but we have researchers that have confirmed it. So that's a big deal. These men are ready to testify. And that is the kind of testimony in front of the right committee that will be seen by enough people that will end this truth embargo. But I'm not suggesting just that. I'm suggesting 20 witnesses to the Intel Committee over a week, and at least 4 of those witnesses will be testifying under oath that the ET craft have been shutting our missiles down.
Very interesting. I recently got the audio book, the 22-hour version of the UFOs and nukes, which I'm sure you've listened to or read. What did you think of that overall? Some of these cases are absolutely amazing that they actually happened, and we don't hear about them in the mainstream news.
Yeah, UFOs and Nukes by Hastings is probably the most important book done on the subject ever. Bob Salas has written several books, including Fated Giant, and then you had the UFOs and Nukes documentary. So all of this has been out there. Hell, the Minot newspaper put a little article alluding to something like this way back in 66 or 7, right? There have been some news articles about this. I've been chronicling them, and I think I can probably come up with a list of maybe 15 or 20 over the years, maybe more, but nothing happened. There's been 2 press conferences about it. Nothing happened. This, I think, it's one of the most significant threads in all of this. And in a few words, it's this. The U.S. government committed early on to embargo this issue until they felt that we had a right to know or a need to know. They don't think that yet still. The ETs have done things all over the place, here, there, everywhere. They've been seen in every conceivable way, underwater, in the air, going into mountains, blah, 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 blah. The government, but it has it under control. And pilot sightings, ground sightings, lights in the sky, no big deal. But possibly because of the near nuclear war crisis we had in October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we almost had a nuclear torpedo launch, which would have probably resulted in a very bad outcome. Only a few years later, they started shutting our nukes down. And this was a real problem for the U.S. government and the Department of Defense. There have been a lot of witnesses, right? Kenneth Arnold and Jesse Marcel, so many. And they dodge them. They weave. It's not a big deal. But the nuclear tampering problem was a huge deal. Why? Because the witnesses are not just a police officer or somebody out walking their dog. These witnesses were Air Force officers who were assigned duty to man the control center of our nuclear weapons site. They don't hand those jobs out casually. You have to be heavily screened. Because why? Because when you're down in that silo, you have the authorization to turn 2 keys, if the right code comes from the president, launch 10 nuclear missiles and kill millions of people as part of an apocalyptic end to modern civilization. That's how big a job you have. And so when men like that, like Bob Salas, started coming forward and say, wait a minute, while I was on duty, a craft hovered over the base and shut these missiles down. What does the DOD do? This problem didn't start until 1994. All of them kept silent. From the 60s decade after decade after decade, there was just a hint, the odd thing here, but nothing serious. Bob Salas came forward in 94 and started this off. Hastings got involved in major research and put out the book. Other witnesses were contacted and ultimately agreed to be part of press conferences were held at the National Press Club in the building where I'm at. And here was the problem the DOD had. What do you do when men like that go public and say our missiles are being shut down by UFOs and the occupants in them? You have four options, and none of them are good. You can kill them, all of them. That happens in some countries, not here. They can't do that. They can't be murdering 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 SAC base officers. It would create a mutiny in the Strategic Air Command. All hell would break loose. You could disgrace them. You would somehow come up with, I don't know, false pedophilia charges or whatever the hell for all of them and eventually ruin them so nobody would believe them. A fiasco. Not a chance. Okay. So what else could you do? You could basically imprison them, lock them down, somehow shut them up in a number of ways with enormous threats, lock them down, pay them off, whatever, and just get them to shut up, go away the moment they emerge. But there was a fourth way. And given that we are still a democratic republic and that the people that are running our Defense Department basically are good people trying to defend the country and not wholesale criminals, the fourth way, they ghosted them. It's a great story. Oh, God, give me $10 million, boy, and we'll put together a documentary that would blow people's minds. They ghosted them. What do I mean? Just pretend they didn't exist. Don't talk about them. Don't respond to any questions. Don't bring it up. Something turns up in the news, nothing. Just ghost them. And if you do that, the basic media, which has always been relatively compliant, will sort of go, well, yeah, I can't get anything from them, and the DOD won't acknowledge it, whatever. Just don't go there, right? And of course, a lot of the media understood why they didn't want to go there. I mean, the DOD is not the only entity that understands how powerful these witnesses are. And so, given that the media, by and large, has not wanted to challenge the truth embargo, though it's written tons of articles, they didn't press it. They gave press conferences, no follow-up. The Congress wouldn't go there. No efforts to get hearings for 30 years. We still haven't had a hearing. They ghosted them. They ghosted these men, the same men that we have given the responsibility to launch our nukes and retaliate in an end time scenario. That is the problem that they faced. It was enormous. And that is why we are where we are right now. The next major development might be a hearing for those witnesses at last while they're still alive. And that, again, gives you an idea of how complicated this is and what the challenges are.
And you mentioned in some countries they might just wipe out those witnesses
Sure.
of nuclear silo incursions. Could you give us any more information on that?
I don't know that. I just know that, in some countries, people know. Like there are countries where if Bob Salas was the officer there, or let's just say he was a Soviet, officer running a Soviet silo, he would probably know that if he wanted to come forward, they were just going to kill him. So you don't come forward. We still are a democracy, a representative republic. And that is not easy. It's a lot easier to be a dictatorship, by and large. There's a lot of benefits from it. We're not that, and we don't kill people in large numbers in order to achieve ends in our country. We do kill a lot of people overseas to achieve ends, and that's another matter. But and so no, Bob felt that he would be okay. Now, it's interesting. The story is that he'd been sitting on it for 30 years, almost 30 years. And of course, like all the witnesses, I mean, it's not easy to know something like that has happened and not talk about it. To know that you can't, I mean, it's just huge. And he did something rather interesting. He filed an FOIA request regarding information about that time, about things that were happening during that period. I forget how he phrased it, but he didn't put UFO in it anywhere. Right? Didn't put that angle on it. Just something else. But he got back information that was confirmatory to him, and he viewed that as kind of, they had pretty much freed him from his HDA, his non-disclosure agreement. Okay, NDA rather, and came forward and the best. And they didn't arrest him. I don't think he was threatened, but they did ghost him. So that's how that got started. One man, really. Robert Jacobs had come forward. I don't know if Robert Jacobs came forward independently with his extraordinary event where he was part of a team that filmed the tampering with a nuclear dummy warhead on a missile traveling 8,000 miles an hour. But it may be that Bob Salas got him out. It may be that Hastings. I know Hastings did a huge amount of research. So some of the people that came forward, Bob found. But overall, Bob Salas starts it. Hastings takes it further. The other witnesses develop. And it's been happening and going on for 30 years without resolution.